We begin on that profanity-filled rant by U.S. Ambassador to Canada Pete Hoekstra. Hoekstra was at a high-profile event in Ottawa on Monday meant to celebrate the Canada-U.S. relationship. But sources tell CBC News the ambassador had some choice words for Ontario's trade representative about the province's anti-tariff ad. The CBC's Ashley Burke joins me now with more on this. So Ashley, this is the talk of the town. Tell us what happened exactly at this event.
Yeah, David, CBC News learned that the U.S. ambassador to Canada went on a tirade aimed at Ontario's trade minister. A witness says that he could be heard swearing, using the F word, and mentioning Doug Ford, his name, and that it appears that Pete Hoekstra was upset about this Ontario ad, this anti-tariff ad that's been playing in the U.S. We've been reporting on it a lot.
Yes.
It's the same one. It's the one that uses former Republican President Ronald Reagan's voice. It's the one that angered Donald Trump to the point where he says he was terminating trade talks and threatened a new additional 10% tariff on Canadian goods. And this latest incident involving the U.S. ambassador, as you mentioned, it happened here in Ottawa on Monday at this really high-profile event that's attended by a lot of people in Ottawa and D.C. And normally at the event, there is a joint toast with the U.S. and Canada's ambassador, where they deliver some remarks. And this year, sources say just one person was up doing that speech this year and that toast, and that was the Canadian side, just showing you how tense the whole situation is right now.
Right. Okay. So Pete Hoekstra is berating David Paterson, the Ontario trade representative to Washington, and coarse language was used. And then there was no joint toast, as we typically see at these things. An unusual night in this town, and led to some unusual and strong reaction, some from the Premier of Ontario today.
Yeah, Ontario's Premier Doug Ford came out today and he said that there should be an apology from the U.S. ambassador, that he should make amends with his trade minister, David Paterson, and really try to put this behind them and move forward. Here's what he said.
Come on, Ambassador. He's a guy, you know something? I like him. Pete, you got to call Dave up and apologize. It's simple. You know, the cheese slipped off the cracker. I get it. You're ticked off.
So you heard him there comment on the trade representative, Ontario's trade representative, David Paterson. So far, there is no sign of an apology. And on the Hill today, some Liberal MPs, when I was up there scrumming people on the way into caucus, were saying this just really shows how high the level of frustration is on both sides. Here's what a few people said.
Swearing in general in this business crosses the line and typically tends to be unprofessional and undignified, not something that we usually see from diplomats.
He's entitled to his opinion. I would say maybe it indicates it was a pretty effective ad.
But a Bloc Québécois MP who was recently in Washington told us that they heard from people there on the ground that a big problem was Ford's anti-Trump rhetoric, his approach to this all, and then that's been a point of tension in talks, and we have some sources saying the same thing. It was brought up as a trade irritant as well, our colleague Kate McKenna reported. And he said that basically, from his perspective, the problem really is Ford and the approach that he's taking here, and that's the problem.
Okay, interesting, considering the Americans started this whole thing. But here we are. That's Ashley, the CBC's Ashley Burke. Ashley, thank you very much. All right, there has been no improvement in relations at the very top either, as both Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump are both in South Korea. But Trump dashed any hope of a pull-aside or any kind of a meeting when he posted this, saying, "For those that are asking, we didn't come to South Korea to see Canada!" Exclamation point. John Manley is a former Deputy Prime Minister. Gordon Giffin is a former United States Ambassador to Canada under President Bill Clinton. They both join me now. Gentlemen, it's good to see you at this fraught time between our two countries. Gordon Giffin, I know there's a language to diplomacy. I'm not sure the F-bomb is part of it. I mean, what was your reaction when you heard what apparently happened here in Monday?
I guess some surprise, but I have to say, second and third hand reports of what might have occurred are not something that I want to make a lot of comment about. I do think that on balance, the job of an ambassador is to sometimes express difficult and maybe difficult messages that aren't well received. But I can say I have no idea what Ambassador Hoekstra said, but I can say I usually didn't swear at my Canadian counterparts.
No, it usually is not a way to make progress on difficult issues. And John Manley, I do appreciate Ambassador Giffin's point that it's second or third hand, but there's a lot of people in that room, as you well know. A lot of people saw this, and so like there's a pretty accurate accounting, it seems, at this point about what's going on. What's your take on this? What this says about the nature of the relationship and the ability to get things back to any kind of a reasonable baseline here?
Well, it's just more of the show that goes on under this current administration. I'm not sure how many times Gordon had to restrain himself from using such language, but I can assure you that he always did. And one thing I'd say about Gordon Giffin is he understood that the role of the ambassador is, yes, to bring the views, in this case of Washington, to Ottawa, and sometimes to express views that were not going to be well received. But the other part of the job, which he did extremely well, is to make sure Washington understood the zeitgeist of Canada and why Canada might be taking a position that it's taking. And this current ambassador, I have to say, it's not this occasion only, but from all reports, his performance at the Banff Business Conference a couple of weeks ago was similar kind of tonality to it, lecturing and telling Canadians what they should be doing. That doesn't engender good relations. It doesn't fulfill the role that he has been entrusted with by his government. It may well reflect the views of his boss, but that sometimes he has to mitigate those views and maybe push back a little bit.
Yeah, Gordon Giffin, I wonder your thoughts on this, because when the U.S. ambassador speaks, it's almost portraying the U.S. as the victim in this. And the way he sort of defines the Canadian reaction by responding to the tariffs and things as almost offensive to the United States, as if we should just sort of take it and live with it. And I look at this from a total amateur in the world of diplomacy, and I wonder how you get back to a normal working relationship when this dynamic just keeps, it seems to be deteriorating.
Well, unfortunately, it seems that we're focusing too much on the soap opera and not enough on the substance. I do think Canada and the United States were making a heck of a lot of progress over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've got a lot of respect for Premier Ford. I think he does a very good job in his role governing the province of Ontario. I think while those sensitive negotiations were going on and Canada was making great progress at the federal level, for the ad to be running is probably bad judgment. The ad is reaching consumers, certainly on television, but it's not affecting the view of the United States government, other than clearly it aggravated some, including the president, at the top of the food chain. So the ad really had no chance of advancing the ball for Ontario or for Canada in these negotiations. It might reach out to the general public, which over time might affect public sentiment. But these are short-term negotiations. Canada was making progress, and aggravating the heck out of senior government officials is probably not the right strategy.
Look, I appreciate your point there, Ambassador, and the soap opera over substance. But you look at the impact it's having here in Ontario. Howard Lutnick essentially told a business group in Toronto that they want to strip the auto sector for parts and move it all to the United States. I mean, the entire bedrock of the Ontario economy is in the crosshairs of the president's agenda here. And the substance, as I see it, is tens of thousands of jobs lost and economic contraction, right?
Clearly, you're right. I guess what I'm suggesting is I might choose a different strategy for trying to advance Ontario's interests. I think my impression is, and at least some secondhand information is, that Canada was making a lot of progress.
Yes.
And on the side, making noise with television ads, had a minimal chance of advancing Canada's interests and had a risk of blowing up.
Yeah, and here we are. So John Manley, the Prime Minister is in South Korea. The President is there. They sat at a table together last night, but had no talks, it seems, beyond maybe some dinner chit chat. How do you reset this now? How do you advance this now if you're Mark Carney? Because the president has said he's going to let it ride, has no desire to talk with Canada, and the economic contagion just keeps spreading throughout the Canadian economy here.
Well, there's not something we can do about this. I mean, I think I agree with Gordon, it's not a very good tactic. It has been used before by the Harper government, by the way, when they bought advertising to try to support the development of the Keystone Pipeline. I don't think that had much effect either. I don't think it even affected public opinion, let alone government opinion. So I don't think these things are particularly useful. And furthermore, I'd be pretty offended if the U.S. or a state government were advertising in Canada trying to tell us what our policies should be. So I think it's not a good tactic. It makes us feel good, maybe, to play the words of Ronald Reagan at a Republican administration, but that's not really the way to get things done. In the meantime, I don't think that there's anything else to do. I mean, the president ought to realize that his ability to influence the comments and commentary of Gavin Newsom is probably slightly greater than that of Mark Carney and Premier Ford. I mean, it's not something the federal government can control, can discipline, can in any way affect. I'd like to see us playing as Team Canada, but we're Team Canada. We all got our home jerseys on, it seems, so that makes it a little tricky. The only thing we can really agree on and cheer unanimously for right now is the Blue Jays.
Yeah, look, and I can appreciate the difference between what's cathartic and what's strategic, right? They're not always the same thing, certainly when dealing with a White House like this. But John Manley, it just seems that this shift is bigger than just a trade negotiation, that there is a fundamental alteration of the Canada-U.S. relationship going forward, that a trust is gone, if not diminished, if not gone, and this is why everyone is looking to other markets. I mean, where do you see this at this point in time, as someone who's dealt with the Canada-U.S. file for a long time?
No, well, clearly this is a different circumstance. I mean, I dealt with it heavily after 9/11, and we were confronted with effectively the closure of the border for several days, and we had to come up with a new arrangement, but everything carried on. And I was dealing with people who didn't throw these threats and these, tariffs on this and that at us with almost casual disdain for the agreement that existed between our governments. Now we're dealing with a completely different situation. I think that there is no doubt, no matter what happens, that the proximity of that massive market in the United States creates a gravitational pull that is irresistible. The U.S. will be Canada's largest market, whether there are tariffs or not.
Right.
However, the reliability of the United States as a trading partner, which will respect agreements that are entered into between us, is in serious doubt, and therefore we have to do what we should have been doing all along, which is build a more diversified and more resilient economy for ourselves.
So Gordon Giffin, final point from you on this. We're about 282 days into the Trump presidency, and it's like you have to apply the dog years metric to it because so much keeps happening. But what is your sense of how Americans view this? I mean, Canadians obviously see a fundamental change here. They've changed their buying habits, changed their vacation habits, and we're soon going to change our trading and our economic habits to a significant degree. Where do Americans see this relationship going, and do they fundamentally care beyond like some border states who do a lot of trade with this country? Yeah,
first, I don't disagree with anything John just had to say. I think I endorse just about everything he had to say. I do think, unfortunately, I grew up in Canada. I worked on the Canada-U.S. relationship much of my adult life. So I grieve over the status of the dialogue right now. And I hope we can reduce the temperature and get back to, as I say, substance over soap opera. But Americans do care. I spent the weekend with friends in Lake Placid, New York. There are Canadian flags all over Lake Placid, New York. I'm in Essex, Connecticut today. There are Canadian flags in front of various businesses. And I don't think it's trying to address the current dialogue between Canada and the United States. I don't think people are running out with them just to express concern. Now, I think it's a long-standing expression of affinity for Canada. I hear it in the South. I'm from the state of Georgia. I hear the same thing about how we need to calm down in our relationship, U.S. Directed at Canada. Now, I will say, and I've worked on some of these in the past as ambassador, and some of them still existed a year ago, where we do disagree on some things. We've had a collaborative, friendly, harmonious relationship, but we still do disagree. And we've got to be able to disagree without all of this noise that I acknowledge was provoked. I don't think we should forget that it was provoked by the foolishness of the 51st state stuff. That was nonsense, and it was offensive to Canadians. The trade issues, there are some legitimate issues to be discussed in trade. And unfortunately, the tenor of the dialogue got prejudiced by the whole 51st state nonsense.
Well, he does seem, the president does seem to be using tariffs as a weapon, right? He weaponizes them and uses them. And I just, Canada has viewed the U.S. as a partner. I wonder if you think the Trump administration views Canada as a partner, or do they see all countries as a competitor, a customer, or a supplier? It's hard to see the word partner entering the vocabulary of this president.
Well, there is no doubt that Canada, both by our government and by our population generally, for decades, has been regarded as a partner. And I used to say frequently that too often, frankly, in Canada, people talked about the United States as their biggest trading partner and talked about the United States as how much goods they sold to us. Whereas I think more in Washington, we discussed Canada as a partner. Yes, an economic partner, but Canada historically has been a geopolitical partner of the United States around the world, certainly where our values and concerns coincided. I think, regrettably, not just in the last year, but that has diminished over the course of the last 5 or 10 years, that partnership. And I think that has been at its core a foundation of how we've worked together. So I hope we can recreate the partnership and not just the economic trade relationship.
Gentlemen, we always appreciate the time. Your individual partnership is a good one. Maybe we can replicate that at a national level. Gordon Giffin and John Manley, thank you so much, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
If they'd let us do it, we'd fix it.
It'd be over.
Have it solved this afternoon over a bottle of bourbon.
Yes.
All right.
Which I'd have to bring since I can't buy it in Canada.
This is another sticking point. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.